The crystalline towers of the Galactic Institute pierced the violet sky of Etheria like shards of frozen starlight. Inside the grand atrium, hundreds of students from across the known systems gathered for the annual welcoming ceremony. Lyra stood among her fellow Etherians, her silver-blue skin shimmering slightly under the bioluminescent lights that danced across the vaulted ceiling. Her crystalline eyes, a mark of her people's advanced evolution, scanned the crowd with barely concealed impatience. She had worked her entire life to earn her place at the Institute, the most prestigious center of learning in 17 star systems. At 23 cycles old, she was already publishing papers on quantum harmonics that made senior researchers take notice. Her people, the Etherians, were known throughout the galaxy for their intellectual superiority and technological advancement. They had mastered faster than light travel 3,000 years. Before most civilizations discovered basic SPACEFLI, GHT. The ceremony began with Chancellor Veram's traditional address, welcoming students from the crystalline collective, the Methane, breathers of Titan's moons, and various other species. But when the Chancellor announced a special exchange program with a planet called Earth, the atmosphere in the hall shifted. Whispers rippled through the crowd like waves across water.Earth, the backwater planet in a forgotten arm of the galaxy. A world that had only achieved spaceflight in the last century, still struggling with primitive chemical rockets and basic fusion reactors. Lyra had read the reports, a species barely past their industrial age, prone to emotional outbursts, warfare, and illogical decision-making. They hadn't even unified their planetary government. When Marcus Reed stepped onto the stage, Lyra felt a mixture of curiosity and disdain. He was tall by human standards, though average compared to most species present. His skin lacked the shimmer of advanced dermal photosynthesis. His eyes held no multispectral capabilities, and his posture suggested someone trying very hard not to appear overwhelmed. He wore simple clothing, functional but unremarkable, and his dark hair fell messily across his forehead in a way that seemed almost deliberate in its carelessness. The other students began their telepathic commentary immediately. The Etherians possessed natural telepathy among their own kind, a network of thoughts that humans couldn't detect or intercept. Lyra joined in, her mental voice dripping with amusement as she observed the humans' awkward wave to the crowd. "Look at how he moves," she projected to her closest friends. No grace, no awareness of energy fields around him. Like watching a child stumble through a dark room. Her friend Celeste responded with a mental laugh. "I heard they still use auditory communication almost exclusively. Can you imagine? Having to make sounds with your mouth to convey every thought?" The commentary continued throughout the ceremony and into the following days. Marcus was assigned to advanced courses, a decision that baffled most students. How could someone from such a primitive world possibly contribute to discussions of quantum entanglement, dimensional physics, or temporal mechanics? Lyra first shared a class with Marcus 3 days after his arrival. It was multidimensional mathematics, a course that typically separated exceptional students from merely good ones. She arrived early, as always, claiming her preferred seat near the front, where the holographic displays would be most vivid. Marcus entered just before the session began, his eyes scanning the room before settling on an empty seat 2 rows behind. Her Professor Kale, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, began the lecture with a problem that had stumped researchers for decades: how to calculate probability waves across 11 dimensions simultaneously while accounting for temporal feedback loops. Lyra's mind engaged immediately, her thoughts racing through equations and theoretical frameworks. Around her, she felt the mental strain of other students, their telepathic presence growing tense with concentration. She completed her solution in 47 minutes, a personal record. Satisfied, she transmitted her answer to the professors. console and allowed herself a moment of pride. Then she noticed something strange. Marcus had also finished. The human sat quietly, his datapad resting on the desk, his expression calm and somewhat distant, as if lost in thought about something else entirely. It had to be a mistake. Perhaps he had given up and submitted an incomplete answer. Lyra waited for Professor Kale to announce the results. When the professor's energy field pulsed with what could only be described as surprise, the entire class focused their attention. 2. Students have achieved correct solutions today. Professor Kale's voice resonated through their neural receivers. Lyra of Etheria, with her typically elegant approach through cascade harmonics. And Marcus Reed, whose solution employs a methodology I have never encountered before. The professor displayed both solutions holographically. Lyra stared at Marcus's work, her confidence wavering. His approach was radically different from anything she had learned. Instead of breaking the problem into smaller dimensional segments, he had somehow treated all 11 dimensions as a unified field, using mathematical tools that seemed to dance between logic and intuition. It was bizarre, almost primitive in its directness, yet undeniably correct. After class, Lyra found herself following Marcus to the library, curiosity overriding her pride. She watched him from across the vast reading hall as he pulled ancient texts on theoretical physics, works written in dead languages that most students avoided. His fingers moved across the pages with surprising reverence, and occasionally he would pause, close his eyes, and appear to be contemplating something profound. 3 hours passed. Lyra had abandoned her own research, fascinated by this contradiction. Finally, she approached his table, her footsteps silent on the energy-dampened floor. Marcus looked up, and for the first time, she saw his eyes clearly. They were brown, simple, and unremarkable by her standards, but there was something in them that made her pause. Depth, intelligence, and something else she couldn't quite identify. "Your solution in class today," she said, speaking aloud in standard. "Galactic rather than attempting telepathy with someone who couldn't receive it. Where did you learn that approach?" Marcus smiled slightly, a gesture that seemed both foreign and strangely appealing. "From home," he replied simply. "We humans have a different way of seeing problems. Maybe it comes from struggling so much, from having to figure things out without the advantages other species have." "Advantages?" Lyra felt defensive despite herself. "You mean evolution? Development? Progress?" "I mean," Marcus said carefully, choosing his words with precision, "that sometimes limitations force creativity. When you can't solve a problem the easy way, you have to find a new way. Humans are very good at finding new ways." Lyra sat down uninvited, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her social protocols. "Explain your solution to me." "Not the mathematics. I understand those. Explain how you conceived of it." For the next 2 hours, they talked. Marcus described a way of thinking that seemed almost poetic, connecting mathematical concepts to physical metaphors and emotional understanding in ways that Lyra's rigorous education had never explored. He spoke of seeing dimensions not as separate layers, but as facets of a single jewel, each reflecting all the others. He talked about intuition, about feeling the rightness of an equation before proving it. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was utterly fascinating. When the library's lights began dimming to signal the evening cycle, Lyra realized she had missed dinner and 2 study sessions with a research group. She stood, feeling strangely reluctant to end the conversation. "You're not what I expected," she admitted, the words feeling almost dangerous to speak. Marcus gathered his books, his expression thoughtful. "Most people from Earth aren't what anyone expects," he said. "Maybe that's our actual advantage." As Lyra walked back to her quarters that night, her mind whirled with equations and ideas. But beneath the intellectual excitement, something else stirred, a feeling she couldn't quite name, uncomfortable and intriguing in equal measure. The human had challenged her assumptions, shown her a different way of understanding the universe she thought she knew completely. She told herself it was purely academic interest, nothing more. But as she drifted towards sleep, her thoughts kept returning to those simple brown eyes and the intelligence that burned behind them. Perhaps, she thought reluctantly, there was more to Earth and its people than the galaxy realized. And perhaps, just perhaps, she wanted to discover what that was. The morning sun of Etheri's primary star painted the laboratory complex in shades of amber and gold. Lyra arrived at the expedition briefing room with her usual precision, exactly 3 minutes early. She had spent the previous week trying to maintain professional distance from Marcus, convincing herself that their conversation had been a momentary lapse in judgment. Yet she found herself noticing him in crowds, her eyes drawn to his presence in shared lectures, her mind replaying their discussion with frustrating frequency. Professor Kale's energy form pulsed with urgency as the selected students assembled. Lyra recognized most of them, Celeste and 2 other Etherians, a pair of silicon-based researchers from the Obsidian Collective, and to her surprise, Marcus. Her stomach performed an unexpected flip that she immediately attributed to nervousness. About the mission itself. "You have been chosen for the Archean expedition," Professor Kale announced, projections filling the air around them. 3 days ago, we detected unusual quantum signatures emanating from the abandoned research station on Archeon Prime. The reading suggests someone has reactivated ancient technology that was sealed millennia ago for good reason. You will investigate, document your findings, and if possible, shut down whatever has been activated. Archeon Prime. Lyra had studied its history. Once a thriving research colony, it had been mysteriously abandoned 700 years ago. The official records claimed equipment failure, but rumors spoke of experiments gone catastrophically wrong, of researchers driven mad by forces they couldn't understand. The station had been quarantined, left to drift in its lonely orbit around a dying star. "Professor," Celeste spoke up, her telepathic voice carrying concern. "Why include the human in such a delicate mission? No offense intended, but his people have no experience with ancient technologies or quantum hazards." Lyra felt a flash of irritation at her friend's dismissive tone, which surprised her more than the comment itself. Marcus, however, simply smiled. That quiet smile of his. "None taken," he said aloud. "But actually, Earth has extensive experience with hazards we don't fully understand. We've been fumbling through the dark for our entire history, learning by trial and error. Sometimes that experience is valuable." Professor Kale's energy field brightened with approval. "Marcus has also demonstrated unique problem-solving capabilities that may prove essential. This is not a debate. You depart in 6 hours." The journey to Archeon Prime took 2 days aboard the research vessel Luminary. The ship was small, designed for a crew of 8, which meant close quarters and unavoidable interaction. Lyra tried to focus on reviewing historical data and safety protocols, but found herself acutely aware of Marcus's presence. He spent much of the journey in the observation deck, staring at the stars with an expression of wonder that seemed almost childlike. On their final evening before arrival, Lyra found him there again, the view screen displaying the slowly approaching station against a backdrop of cosmic dust clouds that glowed with eerie bioluminescence. "You're always looking at the stars," she observed, standing beside him. "Haven't you seen enough of space during your travel here?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "I don't think I could ever see enough. Do you know what it's like, Lyra, to grow up on a world where most people never leave? Where space travel is still something rare and precious? Every star out there represents infinite possibilities, infinite mysteries. Your people have been traveling between worlds for millennia. For us, this is still magic. There was something in his voice, a reverence that made her see the view differently. Through her eyes, this was simply transportation between locations. Through his, it was wonder itself. "Tell me about Earth," she said impulsively. "The real Earth, not what's in the academic databases." Marcus's expression softened, becoming distant with memory. "It's beautiful and broken and perfect all at once. We have oceans that cover most of the planet, water in shades of blue you wouldn't believe, mountains that pierce clouds, forests, where life exists in such density and diversity that every square meter contains thousands of organisms, and cities where millions of people live together, creating culture and art and music." "You miss it," Lyra observed. "Every day," Marcus admitted. "But I'm here because Earth needs voices in the greater galaxy. We need to prove we're more than the primitive upstarts everyone assumes we are." Before Lyra could respond, alarms shattered. The quiet moment. Celeste's telepathic voice burst across the Etherian network. "Emergency stations?" "The station's pulling us in." The luminary shuddered violently. Through the view screen, Archean Prime loomed larger, its ancient docking mechanisms activating after centuries of dormancy. Energy fields Lyra didn't recognize wrapped around their ship like luminous tentacles, dragging them toward a docking port with inexorable force. "Override the autopilot," the captain commanded, but nothing responded. The ancient station's technology was interfacing with their modern systems in ways that shouldn't be possible, bypassing every safeguard. The docking was rough, throwing everyone against restraints. When the ship finally settled, emergency lights painted everything in crimson. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Hull integrity compromised in sections 4 and 7. Life support stable, but failing in secondary compartments. Everyone to the main airlock. We're evacuating to the station until we can repair the ship." The station's interior was a nightmare of corroded metal and flickering lights that seemed to pulse with unnatural rhythms. The air tasted of ozone and something else, something that made Lyra's enhanced senses recoil. The research team moved cautiously through corridors that groaned with age, their portable scanners revealing energy signatures that fluctuated wildly. "The quantum readings are intensifying," one of the Obsidian Collective researchers reported. "Whatever was activated is in the central research chamber, 3 levels down." They descended through the station's depths, the temperature dropping with each level. Frost formed on the walls, despite the environmental systems attempting to compensate. Lyra noticed Marcus moving with surprising confidence, his hand occasionally touching walls as if reading information from them. "How do you know which way to go?" she asked quietly as the group navigated a junction. "The energy flow," Marcus replied, equally quiet. "Can't you feel it? The station is like a living thing, and everything flows toward the heart." Lyra couldn't feel anything of the sort. Her instruments told her which direction the readings intensified, but Marcus seemed to sense it on an intuitive level that defied her understanding. The central research chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows that seemed to move independently of the flickering lights. In the center stood a device that made Lyra's breath catch. It was a sphere of impossible geometry, its surface reflecting dimensions that shouldn't exist in normal space. Fractal patterns cascaded across it, each one containing infinite complexity. The quantum signatures it generated were off every scale. "The old stars," Celeste whispered telepathically. "That's a consciousness matrix." The ancients were trying to digitize thought itself. As they approached, the device pulsed. Reality rippled. And then chaos erupted. The chamber's environmental systems failed catastrophically. Sections of the floor began falling away into darkness below. The device's energy output spiked, creating localized gravity distortions that pulled equipment and researchers in random directions. One of the Obsidian Collective members lost their footing, sliding toward a gap in the floor Marcus moved before Lyra could even process what was happening. He launched himself across tilted floor panels, his movements economical and precise. Despite having no enhanced strength or speed, he caught the researcher's crystalline appendage, his feet finding purchase on a support beam that should have been too narrow for stability. With controlled strength, he swung the researcher back toward solid ground, but the effort left him exposed. A gravity distortion caught him, pulling him toward the device itself. Lyra watched in horror as Marcus was drawn into the sphere's immediate vicinity, where the quantum effects were strongest. He should have been torn apart by the conflicting forces, his molecular structure unable to withstand such stress. Instead, something impossible happened. Marcus touched the sphere, and it responded. The chaotic energy patterns suddenly stabilized, reorganizing into coherent structures. The device's surface shifted, displaying symbols that Lyra recognized from her most advanced theoretical studies, languages that shouldn't exist yet because they were mathematical constructs from future timeline calculations. "Marcus, get away from it," she shouted, fighting against a gravity well to reach him. But Marcus stood perfectly still, his hand pressed against the sphere, his eyes closed in concentration. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to produce. "It's not dangerous," he said. "It's lonely. It's been waiting for so long, trying to complete its purpose." "What purpose?" Professor Kale demanded, the energy being finally reaching stable ground. "To preserve knowledge," Marcus replied, his eyes opening. They glowed faintly with reflected light from the sphere. The ancients knew their civilization was dying. They built this to store everything they were, everything they knew, hoping someone would find it and learn from their mistakes. "How can you possibly know that?" Lyra demanded, finally reaching his side. "You're interfacing with technology that predates your entire civilization." Marcus looked at her then, and in his eyes, she saw something that made her world tilt on. Its axis, knowledge, ancient, profound knowledge that shouldn't reside in a human from a supposedly primitive world. "Lyra," he said softly, "there's something about Earth I need to tell you. Something the galaxy doesn't know, something we've been hiding for a very long time." The sphere pulsed once more, and suddenly Lyra's mind was flooded with images, information, flowing directly into her consciousness. She saw Earth as it had been millions of years ago, not a primitive world, but a thriving hub of an empire that spanned galaxies. She saw a catastrophe, a war that shattered that empire, forcing its survivors to hide, to regress, to wait in obscurity until the threats that destroyed them had faded into forgotten history. She saw humanity's true origin, descendants of the ancients themselves, their genetics locked with suppressors, their knowledge buried in genetic memory that awakened slowly across generations. They appeared primitive by design, hiding in plain sight while they slowly recovered what had been lost. Marcus was a keeper, one of the few humans in each generation born with partial access to that ancestral knowledge. That was how he solved problems differently, how he could interface with ancient technology, how he saw the universe through eyes that carried millions of years of inherited wisdom. "You've been lying to everyone," Lyra whispered, pulling her hand back from the sphere as the flow of information ceased. "No," Marcus said firmly. "We've been surviving. The war that destroyed the ancient civilization, the one that forced them to scatter and hide, that enemy still exists out there somewhere. If the galaxy knew what humanity really was, if they knew we carried the legacy of the ancients, we would become targets again. Earth would be destroyed to prevent that knowledge from spreading." Lyra's mind reeled. Everything she thought she knew about galactic history, about humanity's place in it, had just been revealed as carefully constructed fiction. The primitive humans were actually the descendants of the most advanced civilization the universe had ever known, hiding behind a mask of technological infancy. Why are you telling me this? She asked, her voice barely audible over the spheres. Humming. Because I trust you, Marcus replied simply. And because we need your help. The sphere is waking up, and with it, other ancient sites across the galaxy will activate. When that happens, the old enemy might notice. We need allies who understand what's coming, who can help us prepare. Before Lyra could respond, the station shook violently. The sphere's activation had triggered something larger, some network of ancient installations responding to the signal. Through the chamber's walls, she could see energy patterns spreading like neural networks, awakening systems that had slept. For eons, we need to leave, Professor Kale commanded. Now, before the entire station becomes active. The retreat through the collapsing station was harrowing. Marcus guided them with uncanny accuracy, his inherited knowledge providing instinctive understanding of ancient architecture. When debris blocked their path, he found alternate routes. When energy barriers appeared, he knew the harmonic frequencies. To disrupt them. He saved 3 lives during that escape, including Lyra's when a section of ceiling collapsed above her dot when they finally reached the luminary. And disengaged from the dying station, Lyra stood in the observation deck watching. Archean Prime recede. Beside her, Marcus maintained his quiet presence, but everything about him seemed different now. He wasn't the awkward human trying to fit into an advanced society. He was something far more complex, carrying secrets that could reshape the galaxies. Understanding of itself. What happens now? She asked finally. That depends, Marcus replied. Do you report what you learned? Do you expose Earth's secret and risk everything? Or do you help us prepare for what's coming? Lyra looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the simple exterior to the depths beneath. She thought about everything she had believed, every assumption that had just been shattered. She thought about her people's pride, their certainty, in their own superiority. And she realized that everything she thought, she knew had been the surface of something infinitely deeper. I need time to process this, she said honestly. But Marcus, I need to know, is anything between us real? Or was I just a target, someone you needed to recruit? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Everything between us is real, Lyra. I didn't expect to trust you. I didn't expect to care what you thought. But somehow, you made me want to share the truth, not because it served a purpose, but because hiding it from you felt wrong. Something in Lyra's chest tightened, an emotion she couldn't quite name, but that felt suspiciously like the beginning of something dangerous and wonderful and terrifying all at once. As Etheria appeared in the distance, growing larger through the view screen, Lyra made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't report what she learned. Not yet. First, she would learn more. She would understand the full truth about Earth, about Marcus, about the legacy they carried. And perhaps, in learning those truths, she would discover something about herself as well. The weeks following the Archean Prime expedition transformed Lyra's existence in ways she never anticipated. She moved through her classes and research obligations like an automaton, her mind constantly elsewhere, processing the revelations that had shattered her understanding of the universe. At night, she dreamed of ancient civilizations rising and falling like tides, of Earth hiding in plain sight while carrying the weight of forgotten millennia. Marcus had given her access to restricted files, information that existed only in hidden archives maintained by Earth's keepers. She spent countless hours in her private quarters, her door locked and her communication secured, reading histories that predated galactic record-keeping by millions of years. The story they told was both magnificent and heartbreaking. The ancients had called themselves the architects. They had built wonders that made current galactic technology look like children's toys. They had mapped every corner of the known universe and ventured beyond into parallel dimensions. They had achieved something close to immortality through consciousness transfer, had created artificial worlds, had even experimented with manipulating the fundamental forces of reality itself. And then they had encountered the Devourers, the Files. Described them as entities from outside normal spacetime, beings that fed on consciousness and complexity. They had swept through the Architect's empire like a cosmic plague, consuming entire civilizations, leaving behind only lifeless matter and empty silence. The war had lasted for millennia, a desperate struggle that saw the Architects sacrifice. Everything they had built to slow the advance out in the end, the Architects made an impossible choice. They scattered, destroying their own infrastructure to eliminate the energy signatures the Devourers tracked. They regressed deliberately, fracturing their civilization into thousands of isolated populations across the galaxy, each one suppressing their technology and knowledge to become invisible to the enemy. They became the foundation species from which modern galactic races descended, their true nature hidden beneath generations of genetic locks and carefully maintained ignorance. Earth was one of the last Architect strongholds to fall, and its survivors had gone deeper into hiding than any other remnant population. They had locked away almost all their knowledge, allowing themselves to evolve naturally, while a select few, the Keepers, maintained the barest thread of connection to their true heritage. For millions of years, they had waited, watching the Devourers hunt through the cosmos for any trace of the Architect's signature technology, never finding the scattered survivors who had made themselves invisible. Until now. The activation of Archeon Prime had sent a signal that could potentially attract attention from the wrong places. Lyra found Marcus one evening in the Institute's botanical gardens, a vast greenhouse complex that housed plant species from 40 different worlds. He stood beneath a tree from his homeworld, something he called an oak, its leaves rustling in the artificial breeze. She had sent him a secure message earlier, asking to meet where their conversation couldn't be monitored. "I've read everything you gave me," she said without preamble, her voice low. "The histories, the projections, the warnings. Marcus, if the Devourers are still out there, if they detect the ancient technology awakening, every world in the galaxy is at risk. We're all descended from the Architects in one way or another. We're all potential targets." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression grave in the garden's twilight illumination. "That's why Earth has stayed hidden for so long. We're not just protecting ourselves. We're protecting everyone. If the Devourers realize that Architect descendants survived and are rebuilding technology, they'll return to finish what they started. Then why risk it?" Lyra demanded, frustration bleeding into her voice. "Why come here? Why expose yourself? Why activate the sphere on Archeon Prime?" "Because hiding forever isn't survival. It's slow death," Marcus replied with quiet intensity. "For millions of years, we've been waiting, hoping the Devourers would fade away or leave this region of space. But our long-range monitoring stations, the ones we've hidden throughout the galaxy, have detected anomalies. Energy patterns that match Devourer signatures, far out in the void between galaxies. They're still out there, Lyra, and they're moving. This direction again." Lyra felt her blood chill. "How long do we have? 50 years, maybe less. That's why the Keepers decided it was time to start preparing. We need to rebuild what was lost, relearn the technologies that can fight them, and we can't do it alone. Humanity by itself isn't enough. We need the entire galactic community, but we need them to understand what they're facing without causing panic or making Earth a target for those who would rather eliminate. Use then face the truth. That's an impossible balance," Lyra said, her analytical mind already seeing the complexity of the situation. "I know," Marcus acknowledged. "That's why I need your help. You're brilliant, Lyra. More than that, you're respected. Your people are influential across multiple systems. If you help me build a coalition, if we can bring together the best minds from different civilizations and gradually introduce them to the truth, we might have a chance. Lyra walked to a nearby bench, her legs suddenly feeling weak. The weight of what Marcus was asking seemed impossibly heavy. He wanted her to become part of a conspiracy that could save or doom the galaxy, to keep secrets that violated every principle of scientific transparency she believed in, to trust in his vision of a threat she had never witnessed personally. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "There must be others who would be more useful, more powerful, more connected." Marcus sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, a reminder that despite everything, he was still human, still vulnerable in ways her people had evolved beyond. "Because you see past assumptions, Lyra. When we met, you thought I was primitive, inferior. But you were willing to question that belief when evidence contradicted it. You changed your mind based on truth, not stubbornness or pride. That's rare, and it's exactly what we need." Before Lyra could respond, her communicator buzzed with an urgent alert. She glanced at the display and felt her heart sink. "It's Professor Kale. Emergency meeting, all Archean Prime expedition members required to attend immediately." They made their way quickly to the conference chamber, finding the rest of the team already assembled. Professor Kale's energy field pulsed with agitation, cycling through colors that indicated extreme distress. Holographic displays floated around the room, showing data streams that made Lyra's enhanced eyes widen in shock. "Archean Prime is gone," the professor announced without preamble. The main display showed the station's last known location, now containing nothing but debris and residual energy signatures. Approximately 6 hours ago, it underwent a catastrophic detonation. The explosion was powerful enough to vaporize everything within a 50-kilometer radius. "What caused it?" Celeste asked, her telepathic voice tight with concern. "That's the question," Professor Kale replied. "The energy signature doesn't match any known explosive technology. It's as if the station simply ceased to exist on a molecular level. More concerning, we detected similar signatures at 3 other ancient sites across the galaxy in the past week. Someone or something is systematically destroying ancient installations." Lyra felt Marcus tense beside her, though his expression remained carefully neutral. She knew what he was thinking. The Devourers were already responding to the activation, eliminating potential threats before they could fully awaken. But they couldn't say that, not without revealing everything. "Professor," Lyra spoke up, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. "Could this be a defensive protocol? Perhaps the ancient installations were designed to self-destruct if activated, improperly, to prevent their technology from being misused." It was a plausible explanation, one that gave them cover while buying time to figure out what was really happening. Professor Kale's energy field stabilized slightly as the explanation was considered. "Possible," the professor conceded, "though unprecedented in ancient archaeology. Regardless, the Galactic Council has ordered all exploration of ancient sites suspended indefinitely. They're concerned about triggering more destructions. This expedition is officially over, and all findings are to be classified pending further investigation." The meeting continued for another hour, reviewing their data and testimonies. Lyra noticed how skillfully Marcus guided his responses, providing enough information to seem cooperative while carefully omitting anything that might lead to questions about his unique ability to interface with the sphere. When they were finally dismissed, she caught his arm as they left the chamber. "We need to talk," she said urgently. "Somewhere completely private." Marcus nodded, and an hour later, they were in his assigned quarters, one of the few spaces in the Institute that could be fully secured from monitoring. The room was sparse, decorated only with a few items from Earth. A photograph of blue oceans and white clouds, a small plant in a clay pot, a worn book with actual paper pages. "The destructions aren't defensive protocols," Marcus said as soon as the door sealed. The Devourers have advanced scouts, entities that can cross vast distances to eliminate threats. If they've detected the ancient awakening, they're already here, working to prevent us from rebuilding our defenses. Then we're already running out of time, Lyra said, pacing across the small room. Marcus, you need to tell your people. Earth needs to reveal what it knows, coordinate with the galactic authorities. We can't, Marcus said firmly. The moment Earth reveals its true nature, we become the target. Not just from the Devourers, but from other civilizations who would see us as a threat or an opportunity to exploit. There are species out there who would kill to possess ancient knowledge, who would dissect every human alive to access our genetic memories. Then what do we do? Lyra demanded, spinning to face him. Hide while the Devourers systematically eliminate any chance we have of defending ourselves? Marcus moved to his desk, activating a secure holographic display that projected a star map. Dozens of points glowed across it, scattered throughout known space. These are dormant ancient installations that haven't activated yet. Some of them contain knowledge and technology we desperately need. We have to reach them before the Devourers destroy them, extract what we can, and begin quietly building a defense network. That's impossible, Lyra protested. You'd need ships, resources, personnel. You'd need authorization to travel to restricted zones. One human keeper can't accomplish all that. No, Marcus agreed, turning to look at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. But a coalition could. A small group of trusted individuals from different civilizations, working together in secret. We'd be explorers on the surface, conducting legitimate research while actually salvaging ancient technology and preparing defenses. You're talking about a conspiracy that would violate dozens of galactic laws, Lyra said, but even as she spoke, her mind was already analyzing the logistics. Identifying potential team members, calculating resource requirements. I'm talking about survival, Marcus countered. Lyra, in 50 years or less, the Devourers will reach populated space. When they do, every civilization in the galaxy will face extinction unless we're prepared. Laws won't matter if there's no one left to enforce them. Lyra sat down heavily on the room's single chair, her mind overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was proposing. Every instinct screamed that this was madness, that the rational response was to report everything to the proper authorities and let them handle it. But she had seen the Council's response to the Archeon Prime incident. Classify, restrict, and forget. They weren't prepared for a threat like the Devourers, because they didn't even know such a threat existed. If I agree to this, she said slowly, if I help you build this coalition and search for these ancient sites, I'm betting everything on your word. My career, my reputation, potentially my freedom. I need to know, Marcus. Beyond any doubt, is everything you've told me true? Marcus knelt before her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers. In the dim light of his quarters, she could see the weight he carried, the burden of knowledge that had been passed down through countless generations of keepers. I wish I could prove it to you beyond any doubt, but the only proof would be witnessing the Devourers firsthand, and by then it would be too late. All I can offer is my word, and a promise that I will spend every moment of whatever time we have working to protect not just humanity, but every living being in this galaxy. Lyra studied his face, searching for any hint of deception or manipulation. She found only sincerity and something else, something that made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear or excitement about ancient mysteries. She saw in his eyes a reflection of her own growing feelings, the connection that had formed between them transcending species and secrets. There's another complication, she said softly. Somewhere along the way, while you were showing me impossible truths and asking me to save the galaxy, I started developing feelings for you that are extremely inappropriate given our circumstances. Marcus's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something warmer. For what it's worth, those feelings aren't one-sided. I've spent my entire life knowing I was different, knowing I carried secrets that isolated me from everyone around me. You're the first person I've met who knows the truth and didn't run away. You're brilliant and brave, and you challenge me in ways I didn't know I needed. This is a terrible time to start a relationship, Lyra said, but she was smiling despite herself. Probably the worst timing in galactic history, Marcus agreed, standing and offering his hand. But if we're going to break dozens of laws and risk everything to save civilization, we might as well be thoroughly reckless about it. Lyra took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, noticing how their fingers intertwined as if they had done so 1,000 times before. I must be losing my mind, she said. Everything about this is illogical and dangerous, and probably doomed to fail. Welcome to being human, Marcus said with a gentle smile. We specialize in attempting the impossible. Over the following weeks, they began carefully recruiting. Celeste was the first, approached after Lyra spent days analyzing her friend's character and concluding that her loyalty and discretion could be trusted. The revelation of humanity's true nature shocked Celeste to her core, but her scientific mind couldn't deny the evidence Marcus provided. She joined their cause, bringing her expertise in quantum mechanics and her connections to the Etherean research establishment. Next came Vex, a crystalline engineer whose genius with ancient technology made him invaluable, and Kira, a human pilot who was also a keeper, providing them with someone who could navigate the kind of ships they would need. Slowly, carefully, they built a team of 8 individuals, each bringing unique skills and perspectives to their desperate mission. They called themselves the Threshold Initiative, a name chosen to reflect their position between the known present and the uncertain future. Officially, they were a research group studying ancient civilizations through a comparative cultural lens. Unofficially, they were racing against time to prepare for a war most of the galaxy didn't know was coming. Their first expedition took them to an installation on the ice world of Frostmere, where they recovered data cores containing defensive technologies and tactical information about devourer weaknesses. The second brought them to a hidden facility inside a nebula, where they found partially functional weapon systems that could be reverse engineered. With each success, they grew bolder, more confident in their mission, but they also attracted attention. 3 months into their operation, Lyra noticed signs of surveillance, subtle monitoring that suggested someone in the galactic establishment had taken an interest in their activities. She brought her concerns to Marcus one evening. As they reviewed data in their shared workspace, a converted cargo bay on their ship that served as their mobile headquarters. We have a problem, she said, displaying intercept logs that showed their communications were being tracked. Someone high up in the Council's security apparatus is watching us. I don't know if they suspect what we're really doing, but they're definitely interested. Marcus studied the logs, his expression growing troubled. This could be the exposure we've been dreading, or it could be something else. Some council members might have their own suspicions about ancient technology, their own agendas. Before they could discuss further, their ship's proximity alarms activated. An unidentified vessel had dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly ahead of them, blocking their path. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of their research ship, and its design matched nothing in any known database. That's not a galactic ship, Kira said from the pilot's station, her voice tight with tension. Configuration is wrong. Energy signature is completely alien. Marcus moved to the view screen, his face draining of color as he saw the vessel. That's not alien, he whispered. That's ancient, a warship from before the fall. The communication system activated without any input from their end, and a face appeared on their screen. It was humanoid, but clearly not quite human. Features too perfect, eyes too knowing. When it spoke, the voice carried harmonics that resonated in bones and consciousness simultaneously. "Children of the architects," the being said, "you have been awakening the old places, calling attention to yourselves. We are the Watchers, those who survived the fall by different means than you. We have monitored humanity's long hiding, approved of your patience. But now you rush toward danger, rebuilding what was torn down. You must stop, or you will bring doom upon all you seek to protect." Lyra stepped forward, her scientific mind struggling to process that they were speaking with actual survivors of the architect civilization. "The Devourers are returning," she said. "If we don't prepare, everyone dies. You must understand that." The Watcher's expression was both sad and stern. "We understand better than you realize. We fought them for 10,000 years, watched them consume everything we built. The only reason any architect descendants survived was because we stopped fighting, stopped using the technologies they tracked. If you rebuild those technologies now, before you understand how to shield them properly, you will call the Devourers here decades earlier than they would have arrived otherwise." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Then help us. You have knowledge. We've lost shielding technologies that could make the difference. Work with us instead of threatening us." "We do not threaten, young keeper. We warn. But perhaps you are right. Perhaps the time for hiding has truly passed." The Watcher's image flickered, and suddenly Lyra felt information flooding into her mind. Vast databases of knowledge being transmitted directly into her neural pathways. "We give you what you need to shield your activities, to rebuild safely. But know this, the Devourers are not the only threat you face. There are others who remember the architects, who covet what was lost, who will stop at nothing to possess the power you are unlocking." The transmission ended, and the massive vessel vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving them alone in empty space with minds full of knowledge that would take years to fully comprehend. Lyra looked at Marcus, seeing her own wonder and terror reflected in his eyes. "We're really doing this," she said. "We're actually going to try to save the galaxy." "Together," Marcus replied, taking her hand. "We're going to do it together." In that moment, surrounded by stars and carrying the weight of millions of years of history, Lyra realized that her life had been fundamentally transformed. She was no longer simply an Aetherian scientist. She was part of something larger, a bridge between past and future, between different civilizations, between the truth that was hidden and the truth that needed to be revealed. And standing beside her, holding her hand with a grip that promised he would never let go, was a human who wasn't just human, carrying secrets that could reshape everything. She had started this journey believing humans were primitive, inferior. She had discovered they were ancient, powerful, and carrying a legacy that made them the key to galactic survival. More than that, she had discovered Marcus. And in discovering him, she had found parts of herself she never knew existed: courage, faith, and a love that transcended the boundaries of species and circumstance. The Devourers were coming. The galaxy was unprepared. But Lyra and Marcus and their small band of allies had been given a chance, gifted with knowledge and purpose. By survivors who had waited millions of years for the right moment to emerge from hiding, the story of humanity's secret was only beginning. And Lyra intended to see it through to whatever end awaited them, whether triumph or tragedy, as long as she could face it standing beside the human who had changed everything she thought she knew about the universe and about herself. Together, they would write the next chapter of galactic history. And maybe, just maybe, it would be a chapter about survival, unity, and the power of connection across the vast distances that separated stars and souls.